Then I went to like a gynecologist. We noticed some like scarification and stuff. And we're like, oh, okay. Kind of put two and two together. Asked my mom about it. Weird babysitter with a kind of a weird son. And we're able to be like, okay, presumably this is probably what's happening. Right? So there was this piece of like, I didn't even know the event had happened because I was not old enough to remember it. But it obviously had impacts on me because I was having panic attacks when men touched me. And I had no, like, I have no knowledgeable experiences with men that were like so bad that I'd be having panic attacks when men like are touching me or coming near me.
Sure.
When I think about what was like more distressing though is...
Okay, let's say I actually want to do this. What is it? How do I even make an appointment? I don't have a doctor or anything. What is that? Do I just talk to a hospital and I say... Okay, ready?
Yeah. Who's we?
Me and my chat and all of TikTok now.
Oh. Oh, is this with the feminist girl?
Maybe.
Okay.
But I don't know which part got clipped, so what you've seen. But basically, the question is I think we've probably even talked about this a little bit before, but I haven't like explored it a ton. But I'm starting to think about it more now recently. How much of the trauma related to sexual assault do you think is like socially enforced versus like just will always happen because of like the biological realities of like getting raped?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. There's a really good book that I would first start with. It's called The Body Remembers. It's by Babette Rothschild. It's not The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's like, it's very heavy, it's very research, it's very boring because it's just like constant papers being cited. It's for sure both, right? In the case of, I think especially early childhood stuff, the level to which people will not remember their early childhood stuff, but have a lot of later on effects that are commonly known to be connected to early childhood sexual abuse is uncanny, right? Really high rates of IBS, really high rates of chronic illness, and high rates of things like panic disorders and things like trauma-esque sounding disorders, right? So I think early childhood, and I think anything that is like penetrating your body to some extent, we don't really understand like the connection between your body and your brain. And there's a lot of cringy pop psych about it right now, where they just like fixate on like the vagus nerve and stuff like that. But there's no way that you could convince me that like a brain with as integrated as a sensory motor system as ours, that is so connected to our body, isn't going to be impacted. This is why like when you're under 2, even though you can't really form like real memories, like episodic memories that you can look back on, you can still have like procedural memories, like learning how to walk, right? So I think there's an element of like body stuff that I think is really connected to sexual assault. The issue is like sexual assault now encompasses so many different experiences that it's hard to generalize my statement to that, right? So I want to be like careful because I don't want to discredit anyone with like certain types of sexual assault that I think necessarily probably more often than not leads to trauma. But we also know that the brain is very relative in a lot of ways. In my studies, obviously there's going to be scientists who disagree with me, take my opinion, caveat with a grain of salt, anything that you would like. In my view, there's interesting studies that look at, for example, negative childhood experiences internationally, like cross-culturally. And they'll compare, for example, like PTSD and other like my childhood fucked up, I fucked up syndrome type disorders. So attachment disorders, things like that, between kids like in Canada or US versus kids in like, for example, like a third world country, right? So you've got one kid like who grows up, like I'm sure everyone's like met it. Like you'll meet, I remember my brother was dating this guy from like, I think Nigeria, right? And he like had tons and tons of scars across his back from where he was switched while he was a child, right? And I look at that and I'm like, that's horrifying. He has scarification from his parents, but he like is very clearly like, oh, I'm not traumatized. When we look at like the prevalence rates of these like mental health conditions that we would expect to be related to like higher levels of, for example, like hitting your child, we don't really see it. Because in a lot of ways, like there are some experiences that I think will always be distressing to people. And then I think there are a lot of experiences that our society tells us whether it's distressing or not. And that is what will inform us about whether we're distressed, especially as kids.
Interesting. No, that wasn't interesting. It's pretty boring, actually.
Damn. All right. Well,
I
go back to
agree.
pew pew pew. Okay, pew pew pew.
No,
Kill the robots.
I agree with you. I was hoping you would totally disagree with me. We could argue about it. I think I lost like 2 friends over over my take.
Really? What was your take?
That I think that some of that plays in, but it's basically women arguing that like, no, rape is always the most traumatic thing in the world, and nothing about society has any influence over that, and you're just trying to tell women that like they're not allowed to feel traumatized by something. It's like that's not at all what I'm trying to say. I'm just curious, like to what extent, because I think the original question I proposed was, why is it that sexual assault or rape seems so much more traumatic than even the most like violent of assaults, right? And like, I can ask people like, what's more? This is a guess. I don't have a poll on this. Maybe I should tell Ayla to make one or fucking whatever. But like, if I were to ask somebody like, what's more traumatizing, like very low forms of rape, or like the worst of like getting jumped by like 3 guys and getting mugged or whatever, I feel like most people would say like the lower forms of rape. And then like I've talked to other people, even Brittany came on, and I'm like, I feel like a lot of people, and Brittany came on and she said, yeah, a lot of people feel like getting raped is worse than getting murdered. And I think you could extrapolate that. I think a lot of people genuinely would say as much. And that's just very interesting to me. And I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, I think
what sets the sexual assault stuff so much further apart from the physical assault stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's so my friend actually works with sexual assault victims. That's like her job right now, is doing advocacy work. And it's really interesting talking to her because if you don't know, I experienced childhood sexual assault. I don't remember it at all, right? So I'm in this state where I had no memories. I just had panic attacks every time men touched me. And I was like, that's weird, right? And then by the time I got older, then I went to like a gynecologist. We noticed some like scarification and stuff. And we're like, oh, okay. Kind of put 2 and 2 together, asked my mom about it. Weird babysitter with a kind of a weird son. And we're able to be like, okay, presumably this is probably what's happening. Right? So there was this piece of like, I didn't even know the event had happened because I was not old enough to remember it. But it obviously had impacts on me because I was having panic attacks when men touched me. And I have no knowledgeable experiences with men that were like so bad that I'd be having panic attacks when men like are touching me or coming near me.
Sure.
When I think about what was like more distressing though, is once I realized it happened, is like kind of the experience of like conceptualizing who I am after that, right? Like, and what the world tells me. And like, I'm really lucky in that like all of my friends and family are like pretty like real trauma informed. So when people say trauma informed, they mean 2 things. One thing means they're going to like call everything a trauma and talk about trauma all the time. And other people are very, very mindful to like watch their language and say like, how do you feel about this? How would you label this experience for yourself? Sure. And I'm lucky that all my friends were the latter type, right? Where they just allowed me to experience it and explore it as needed. And I'm so curious to know, and I can't know, I'd be curious to know how my experience when I realized at like 21 that this event had happened to me would have been if somebody, when I told them about it, freaked out, told me I was a trauma and a victim, and like got really upset on my behalf. Like, how would I have experienced that event? And I have I don't know, and I can't know. There's no way that I can know.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But there's kind of like this frustration of like sexual assault really matters. And I think the problem with sexual assault is is the way for a lot of girls that it like with your brain, particularly, right? Like when we talk about things like physical abuse versus like emotional abuse, I don't know. It's hard to quantify like which one's worse. Most people who've experienced both say that it's the emotional abuse that was worse, like the mind fucking that happens, right? And so when we're talking about like a sexual assault, I'm really concerned about like the mind fucking that happens. But I have a hard time because sometimes it feels like there's like stolen valor that occurs, right? Where like when
Jesus Christ. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
Get that heat off me. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Where like when some women are talking about like their sexual assault, they're talking about like a situation where like it was really blurry consent. It isn't a good situation. They maybe said yes, but looking back, they're like, I was way too fucking drunk to be saying yes, which is like bad. Like it's not a good thing, right? It's hard to conceptualize that against like, like victims that I've worked with where like it was much more explicit that it was a no. They were completely passed out and drunk and like woke up to somebody inside them, right? Like these types of situations that are just like much more egregious.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I want to be so careful because I don't want to dismiss people's like experiences. I just think that we need to be really, really careful about like how we're describing them because I'm concerned that we're convincing people that they're like potentially more traumatized than they
I'm
are.
curious if there's research on it because I don't know if this is, but like the comparison that I would make would be like the like when a child falls over and they look to the parent for a response. I wonder if we still do that with like traumatic events to some extent. And then I'm curious if there's any research like illustrating like to what extent we do that. But I don't even know.
How would we study it?
Yeah, you'd have to ask like, did you get raped and how did your friends respond? And then, how was your response after that? And then do like inventories or whatever to figure out after. But it seems like that'd be pretty difficult.
And the reality is that like what's distressing to me might not be distressing to you based on just like basic things like sensitivity to stimuli, because we know that people have different thresholds for stimuli that they can like put up with, but also like your worldview and expectations, right? Like somebody who gets sexually assaulted, but like maybe they're in kind of a world where like everyone they know has been sexually assaulted, so it's like bad, but it's not like the scariest thing. They might, even if it's a worse instance where when they look at like the actual facts of what happened, we're like, that's really bad, they might feel less about it than somebody who experienced a way less situation, but it's so outside of like their worldview of what should occur in their life that like the second person is actually like more psychologically distressed over it.
Yeah, that's kind of like in a paradoxical sense. I think that was one of the topics that me and Ayla hit on, where it was like, is it possible maybe that living in like a worse type of environment makes you less likely to be traumatized because your expectations are so much different? So think like spousal rape, right? Like if that's just your society and it happens, then I guess like in your head you kind of like, this is your duty as a wife, and like I guess it kind of sucks, but like this is kind of what's to be expected, what happens. And as long as it's like the expectation, you don't have the same like I guess like cognitive like fissure of like, why did this person do this to me? I don't know why this is happening, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
maybe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know because, I mean, we do have data that suggests at least like people who have experienced early on people who have experienced trauma are more likely to develop like things like PTSD later, right? Like there's kind of this correlation of mapping on of like, if you have one mental health problem, you're more likely to have any other mental health problem. And so, it's like, does a tough life build resilience? It seems like in some people it specifically does, right? Like 25%. The problem is that like it seems like another 25% probably are directly harmed by the same type of experience and are left at like a higher level of risk.
And it's really hard to figure out.
Yeah.
Maybe impossible to figure out like who's going to be what.
At least right now. I mean, with the predictive mapping that we're starting to do, I think that's a really new branch of psychology and like neuroscience that is like if the theoretical model is correct and we can begin to predict like who is going to develop different like mental health disorders, it might revolutionize mental health treatment. But got to kind of wait to see if it actually bears out in evidence, basically.
Yeah.
Are you pew-pewing again? Oh yeah.
Yeah, my brain is super like fizz.
Did you end up getting an Adderall prescription?
No. I went to the dentist though.
Okay, that's nice. Squeaky clean. Get those veneers on.
No, what the fuck?
Oh no, I feel like that's just like a rich. I just assume all rich people have veneers.
Oh, I hate that. The ultra white teeth shit is fucking creepy.
Not the ultra white, not like the gross veneers. I mean like the veneers that are very nice looking. They just like even out your tongue.
Why would I get fake fucking teeth?
Well, it's not fake teeth. It's like fake plating on your teeth. I don't know. I just thought rich people do that. Okay.
Yeah, I think it looks weird. Fuck that.
Oh, I was gonna ask you something. Fuck, I got derailed by that. What was that? Oh, Adderall. Didn't you say that Adderall helped you like be actually like plugged in to the moment?
Yeah, it did. But like, I mean, so does like MDMA.
Okay, interesting. Basically, you just don't want like pharmaceutical interventions on your life.
I probably should. Stop being a bitch. But...
Have you been tested for like ADHD?
No, but I feel like the Adderall experience probably means I'm probably pretty super fucking ADHD.
Possibly. I mean, anyone who takes Adderall at a small enough dosage is going to be more focused and like more like honed in on a specific event.
I felt very calm, and it was a really, really. Or I think it was a decently high. I took 30 milligrams of the Adderall XR shit, and I was like the chillest I've ever been in my entire life for like a whole day. And I've heard that if your brain is like super fucking weird or whatever, that like, of course. I don't give a fuck. Fucking crush this kid. It doesn't even fucking matter.
So,
Okay. Oh yeah, that like if your brain is like naturally like really fucked on these like neurochemicals that like that even high doses of Adderall will just like chill you the fuck out.
yeah. So I spoke to the world leading expert in ADHD research the other day, Stephen Fairwin.
Okay.
And you know what he said about behavioral treatments for ADHD?
Don't do them.
They're almost completely, no, they're just mostly completely ineffective. That like medication for ADHD people is pretty similar to like glasses for like nearsighted people. There's one thing that he said of basically where they like magnetically stimulate cranial nerve 5, which is like in your temple basically. And that is seeming to alleviate some ADHD symptoms without like medication. But for the most part, the main thing that's going to like make a major difference, not that I'm like diagnosing you or anything like that, but is still ADHD medication.
Okay.
You're like an old boomer who's just been like blind for 20 years and refuses to go get glasses.
Maybe. What if it's like, have you ever seen House?
Yeah. What if it's
Yeah,
lupus?
You know, yeah, well, no. You know, House needs to be like miserable in order to be like a good doctor. Maybe I need to be ADHD in order to be focused enough to.
Yeah, but
do
if
my
you don't,
shit, you know?
if you don't test it, you'll never know. Like, would just do like, why don't you just do like a week, do like a little experiment? Do it for a week, and then if you don't like it, like the reality with ADHD medication is you could go off of it. Like talk to your doctor, and I'm sure that they can be like, yeah, let's try it for like 7 days, and then if you're not comfortable, come back, we'll chat about it, and then go on from there. And to be clear, that is what Stephen Fairwin, world leading research psychologist, said, not me. So I'm just.
Okay, let's say I actually want to do this. What is it? How do I even make an appointment? I don't have a doctor or anything. What is that? Do I just talk to a hospital and I say I need drugs, or what? How do I even get that set up?
Wait, you don't
What's
have.
the process?
Okay, so you should definitely try to get like a GP. The main thing is you're gonna.
I move like every year. I don't have time for that.
Okay, get fuck's sakes. Your actual boomer energy right now. You're like, I'll see next year. Okay, psychiatrist. What you need to do is see a psychiatrist. So you just need to see a GP to get referred to a psychiatrist. They will do some of the testing for you. Or you can pay.
Any GP refer you? Like if I've got like one in my audience, could they just like refer me?
If they want to, I think so, yeah. You'll have to ask them. I'm not a GP. You can also, if you want to just get the testing and you want to pay out of pocket, you can pay like a neuropsychologist to do a full gambit of like cognitive assessments, which is kind of the best way that we do diagnostics for ADHD right now. They'll test you for things like inhibition and IQ and stuff like that.
What if my IQ is like 103?
Well,
couldn't handle
if you
myself.
have actual ADHD, your processing speed and your working memory will be like usually 1 to 2 standard deviations below every other indus, and then they won't
Right,
actually.
so I'm a retard.
No, they don't. They technically are not allowed to give you an IQ if there's like.
It would be so low. They would.
It would be so low. Yes, exactly. So if they see that pattern, and then when they do like, they might do like a WEPC or like NEPC or something like that, and it'll test for like a bunch of stuff like executive functioning. Big science words. They'll do a bunch of testing to see kind of. Okay, they're gonna do things like testing like different parts of your brain to see kind of how they're functioning and operating and working together. If you like really suck at inhibition, for example, that's a pretty strong indication. Plus the IQ scores of like the depressed 2 indices that like ADHD might be at play. They're going to ask you like environmental measures, like, do you feel this way everywhere? And your answer is going to be yes, I'm assuming. Based on my exposure to you, the answer seems to be strongly yes, Mr. I'm on my phone while I'm out with frenzies. Yep.
It should be more entertaining. It's not my fault.
Why don't you entertain them?
I do that on stream. I get paid for that. I'm not doing that shit for free.
Oh, yes. Famous streamer. Entertain me, plebs. I'm off time.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. So they'll do a bunch of testing. From that, they'll be able to diagnose you. If you get a proper diagnosis, you could basically go back to a doctor, and they'll probably just prescribe you. To be honest, there's a good chance you'll find a doctor who will just give you drugs if you want it, really. But that's
famous?
no, because no. Yeah, because you're famous, and they really want to entertain you. But that would be like the correct way to go about it if you want to be dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Okay. Wait, hold on. So I would just like Google like local psychiatrist.
Yeah. Do you want me to like look into it a little bit and send you like a couple of like names in your area specifically?
am I going to be like unable to find like a competent? Can I just Google it? Is there like a?
Well, it
am I gonna get,
depends.
like,
Do you want to do a psychiatrist or do you want to do a neuropsychologist?
That sounds like a lot more testing.
Yeah, the neuropsych is going to take about 8 hours of testing, but then you won't be able to doubt it.
Send a kid with ADHD into 8 hours of testing.
They'll break it up into 2 days and give you juice boxes. Okay, juice boxes, head pats, and cookies.
There's juice boxes.
Yeah. What's your favorite kind of juice?
Askanawi, is that what they're called?
That is. Never mind. I'm not gonna say it. I'm good. Good. Very good. All right. Yeah. Unless you just want to go to psychiatrist, it'll be like a much briefer conversation. And there's a chance that a psychiatrist still might send you to a neuropsychologist, but it'll depend up to the doctor.
Okay.
Yeah. As your friend, this is what I recommend, not as anyone in the field, obviously.
Not as a psycho, meadow, whatever the fuck.
Not as a psycho witch.
To be before.
Yeah. Before I was deep exposed.
Got you. Yeah.
Yeah. The big chucho. I'd be super curious. You're about to lose the pew pew. Are you green and yellow is who you're fighting?
Okay. What are you super curious about?
I think that's it. Oh, I'm super curious to know if you do it. I'd be curious what your experience is on Adderall for like a week straight, particularly for your streaming. I'd say it would like flatten your affect, but
it would flatten my affect. Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say you're already bottomed out, so I'm not too worried about that one.
Wait, what? What do you think a flat affect means?
What? Remember when we did that Twitter files thing? Not Twitter files. Sorry, the Twitter tryout. There we go. Yeah. And I got you to make that little frog face.